bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da da 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 ba 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 doobie doobie da da bum bum ba da.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. In this episode, we are dabbling in sacred secrets with a loin sling full of monkey oranges as we track the mother herd of all buffalo into our creator corner, where we are chatting with Jeff Smith about Tuki from Cartoon Books.
Loin sling full of monkey oranges.
Say that 10 times fast.
I was impressed that you did that in one take,
First
Lisa.
take, you guys, a very rare one take. I'm not even pleased with it.
No, it was so good. And if there was ever an episode to be stumbly bumbly, this is the one, because as everyone is going to hear, we're more than a little excited to be chatting with Jeff Smith.
I have never seen Brad so starstruck. It was sweet.
I haven't officially edited the audio of the conversation itself yet, but I'm going to try to remove my very weak start to this conversation. And, you know, if I'm feeling generous, I'll include it as a tag to this episode. Or it might be in the conversation because I was unable to edit it out. So stay tuned.
All editing is just like twisting knobs. You're just going to take that awkward knob, turn it way down.
Lower that awkward knob.
We were kind of tipping the levels on our awkward.
Yeah. And, you know, like that's what Brad and Lisa do. That's what Brad and Lisa have been doing for 15 years. I was reminded by Facebook this morning that Lisa and I entered our online relationship 15 years ago.
So how does that math work out? Like, were we dating when we first became friends on Facebook?
Oh, I remember signing up for Facebook vividly because of you.
Oh, really?
So we had met about a year before that. So we've known each other for about 16 years when I was hired at Barnes & Noble in Reston, Virginia, and you were already working there.
Okay.
But then, like, over the course of that next year, we awkwardly flirted. You made your feelings known that, like, hey, maybe we should do some things together away from the store. And I was like, hold on. Is someone flirting with me? Is someone flirting with me? And then we agreed. We went on that Cheesecake Factory date.
Yeah, well, the conceit was we were going to buy you new glasses.
Right. Because I was complaining. We were in a party situation. We were at a bar with all the booksellers, and I was complaining about my glasses being not cool.
Because they weren't. They were aviator glasses.
Yeah, they were not cool. And then you said, I'll help you pick out new glasses. And then I said, I guess I'm getting new glasses. We went to the mall. We ate at Cheesecake Factory. We had an awkward hug. And then we initiated a few more dates. And it took like a little while. We had that we've talked about on the podcast, but we had a really terrible first kiss. But you still decided to, like, let's keep that guy around.
I'll give him another shot.
And it was after our awkward first kiss that I then signed up for Facebook because you were on Facebook.
I was.
And I wanted to keep track of you.
Yeah, I also joined Facebook for dating reasons. And that didn't work out, but this did.
Yeah, this did. And could you have imagined 15 years ago, Lisa, that we would have a podcast together and we would be chatting with Jeff Smith, the creator of Bone?
I don't think I knew who Jeff Smith was 15 years ago.
Okay, all right. Well, how about 7 years ago? Could you have imagined it then?
I suppose I could imagine having a podcast because I did listen to podcasts and I loved them.
What I'm getting around, Lisa, is that this is incredible. Like, it is unfathomable, that's hard to say, that we are chatting with Jeff Smith this week on Comic Book Couples Counseling. Like, this is a dream come true. And, you know, if we think about it, the last Creator Corner conversation we had was with Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino.
Right.
We're now chatting with Jeff Smith. And next week, or our next Creator Corner conversation is with Stan Sakai talking about Samurai Rabbit and Usagi Yojimbo. Like, any one of those conversations would have made my year, would have made my decade. And now all three of them have happened within the span of, 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's insane. And it's set a weird precedent where every two weeks or so, I'm like, I need to talk to somebody super rad right now.
Yeah, I mean, where can we go from here?
The ghost of Jack Kirby. Let's throw a seance.
Oh, I'm not opposed to attempting to commune with Jack Kirby in some way. Hey, Jeremy Kirby, what's up? Are you listening? Let's chat.
We better stop self-congratulating because we are going to jinx ourselves and we will never get an interview again.
Yeah, and, this is Jeff Smith, the creator of Bone.
Let's live in the present.
This is a moment. Bone, for me, like, that comic shaped my imagination. I started reading those back in the black and white days, the cartoon books days, before Scholastic took over and colorized them and turned them into these beautiful digests. And I think we talk about this on Mike with Jeff, so I won't spoil it too much, but I was there at the SPX where Scholastic was announced as a partner with Bone, and I remember being so like, oh no, oh my precious thing, change is bad. And, that was the smartest thing Jeff Smith ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And Bone is one of those comics where once you complete the epic and you fold it into your personality, your philosophy, you're like, well, like, where can a creator go from here? Like, it's just so damn good. And Jeff Smith has made some incredible comics since then. Highly recommend Razzle. And now here he is with Tuki, a comic that initially started online, and then he published 3 single issues before he kind of rejiggered the whole thing, and has now put them out currently as 2 trade paperbacks, 2 very large formatted trade paperbacks. Fight for Fire, which is currently available, and Fight for Family, which, if you were a Kickstarter backer, you have access to the digital edition now, but the physical copies will arrive on July 5th. And I gotta tell you, and I embarrassed myself slightly with Jeff Smith at the beginning of this conversation, where, like, I read that first trade paperback, I was like, man, Jeff Smith makes great comics, I really like this. And it's in that second volume, the one that's coming out, Fight for Family, where you start to see the bigger picture of what Tuki is becoming, and you realize, oh, we have a Bone-level mythology in the works. This is something truly special. This is next-level Jeff Smith.
You'll hear in this conversation that the idea of setting a mythology at this particular point in human history 2 million years ago, when there were 5 species of humans just wandering around fighting to see who makes it.
Yeah,
like,
so good.
That concept has just been like tickling the back of his imagination for a long time. And that's something that I relate to. I have, like, particularly when it comes to science facts, I'm like not a scientist, but something will resonate with me kind of like poetically. Mm-hmm. Like, what was the documentary, sweetheart?
Oh, it was Werner Herzog's At the End of the World, I believe, his Antarctica documentary.
And he mentions in this documentary that there are these deranged penguins who, for some reason, there's something wrong with their psychology or their inner compass, and they just start wandering the wrong way. And I have folded the idea of the deranged penguin into my psyche. It has become a metaphor for, like, so many things.
I can't believe you're even bringing it up on the podcast.
I know. And it's something where I'm like, I've tried to do something creatively with it, and it's just never become a thing.
I feel like I think that is something that we need to get back to, or that you need to get back to. Like, I see in our future a deranged penguin comic book. I really do.
Yeah, because I was trying to do, like, an epic poem.
Yeah, and now we've just spoken it into the microphones of our Jeff Smith episode.
That has never resulted. That kind of accountability has never really resulted in a product for us.
We'll see.
But I use that as an example of sometimes ideas just stick with you and stay with you. And the idea that Jeff Smith can like kind of like just like paleontology, just continue to dust off with a fine-tooth brush around the idea until it becomes something.
Yeah.
It's just so inspiring and impressive to me.
Yes.
And I find the story of Tuki to be just so special because he takes this point in history and goes like, what would it look like if these species conspired around one or a handful of Homo erectus that had a good idea?
Yeah, and turns out I feel like Tuki is one of those comics that is speaking to the moment, this very divisive era in American history, in global history. I think Smith is percolating on a lot of anxiety that is working out quite well for him as a storyteller.
You are not going to believe the length of this conversation. Like, you look at that and you go like, oh, Brad and Lisa must have been bloviating on for 45 minutes before we get into the interview. No, he spoke to us for over an hour.
Yeah.
We really get into it.
Yeah.
And I really cherished our time.
Yeah, it was extremely special. And there's like this moment before we hit record where Jeff Smith is giving us compliments.
Oh, words of affirmation.
And I couldn't even handle it, which is why when we start the actual chat, you're going to hear some very like...
Or they might not. You could have just planted it in their heads. You put the seed in their heads that Brad Gullickson is an awkward interviewer.
Yeah. Just like prepare yourself. And if you don't hear it, let me know. And you should just know that I was like vibrating with anticipation and joy because this is the Jeff Smith interview on Comic Book Couples Counseling.
The first?
The first of hopefully many, because I'm going to need this conversation to continue as more Tuki comics come out. There's so much to explore within this world and within its hidden world.
So I don't think we spoil anything in this interview.
Like plot details, stuff. Nothing major. We talk about the characters a little bit.
So if you have not read the comic book yet, you can still listen to this interview.
Yeah, Lisa's always afraid that people don't listen to these interviews in fear of spoilers. Yeah, you don't have to have read the comic book, but I'll tell you what, if you listen to this interview and you don't buy the comic book, I don't believe you exist. That's impossible. You're not a real being. Anyone who hears this conversation is going to want Tuki comics in their lives.
That's right. You're either a phantom or someone who goes to the library. They could check it out, probably.
Yes. Use the library. Use Hoopla if you can. Speaking of which, shout out to the Reston Library. They just started their book sale today.
Oh, yeah.
So
we got to check that out.
If you're local to Brad and Lisa, head on over to the Reston Library and take advantage of that.
We should take advantage of it before we release this episode because we're going to miss out on some good books.
Yeah, that's a good point. But, support your local library.
Before we can get into the interview, we need to give a little plot synopsis, a little context. Tuki is a Homo erectus, just like us, a fire starter, and he thinks he's a lone wolf as he goes seeking Moab, the mother herd of all buffalo. But then he runs into this Homo habilis, who is like an anti-fire species of human, and he gets poofed in the face with some dust, and he's given this prophecy, of which he is somewhat skeptical, but he can't manage to shake Doc.
Yeah.
And so he continues on his quest, but then he ends up rescuing these 3 children who are also Homo erectus from this like gorilla demon thing.
So good.
And yeah, it's just like a quest story.
Well, and there's also Quarrel. He's like on the fringes of the story that eventually like joins their troop. And he has like this, I would say he shares some cartooning DNA with the Bone Cousins. And there is a backstory there that I am very interested in.
And he's also like a third species of human. So at first you get the sense that these 3 different species are like competing for dominance, but as these characters cling closer to each other, you begin to get the sense that Homo erectus is actually the result of a collaboration of several human species who kind of start just like rooting for Tuki because he's so like charismatic and he has these really cool ideas, like the loin sling thing became very hip.
Yeah, that loin sling. I think we got to stop. I think we got to be quiet. I think we need to like move into this actual conversation with Jeff Smith.
When you say be quiet, it kind of hurts my feelings because I'm the only person in this room, and clearly you mean me.
I was also speaking to myself because I love talking about Tuki, and I have a tendency to ramble, Lisa.
Oh, that is true. You are a rambling man.
Yeah. One last thing.
How dare you, after you told me to be quiet.
I'm so sorry, but we had this conversation with Jeff before the Netflix news dropped.
Oh, that's right.
So we will not be discussing the sadness regarding Bones' no future on Netflix.
Though we don't have to discuss it because he did post his feelings in the form of a cartoon that is crushing.
Yes, and links in the show notes to that cartoon. And, oh man, so brutal. But, I still have hope for Bones' animated future. But even if I have hope for Bones' animated future, it doesn't matter because I have Bone the comics right before me right now.
Be quiet.
Be quiet. Yes. Silence. Jeff Smith, take it away. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us at Comic Book Couples Counseling. Welcome to the Love Nest.
The Love Nest. Oh, well, it's so nice to be here. Good to see you, Brad and Lisa.
Yeah.
I almost said Blad. I don't know where that came from.
Well, if Jeff Smith's going to call me Blad, I'm going to go with Blad. I may even change that name. It is a true honor and a privilege to have you on the podcast, chatting all things Tuki. We just finished volume 2 this morning.
All right.
And I enjoyed volume 1. I really, really liked volume 1. Volume 2 is where everything came together for me. I love Tuki.
I was a little nervous when you said, well, I liked 1.
No, I know. I really liked 1, but I loved Tuki volume 2.
Yes.
And I think where I wanted to start this conversation is with volume 2, and it's there in volume 1, but I start to really see the world that you're exploring. 2 million years BCE, you have these 6 species that are going to become humanity, or one's going to become humanity. It's like this period of transformation where we could become anything or nothing. And I want to know why you wanted to explore this particular period at this point in time, and maybe how it relates to your own feelings of where you are in life or what have you.
Well, it all came together through a long process. I've always been fascinated by evolution, human origins, where do we come from? And when I was 14 is when the famous Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis fossil, was found. And it was big, big news. I mean, here was the fossilized skeleton of a female that had features that were both ape and human, basically human from the waist down. And it was like, there were TV specials about it. There were, Life magazine specials about it. It was a big deal, and it really hooked me. And then many years later, I went to the Tarangire National Park in Tanzania, and in there, near the Great Rift Valley, is Olduvai Gorge, which is not where Lucy was found, but was where one of the other early hominid species was from. And being there, I talk about it in the book a little bit. I had a vision, because they were talking about, the roots of humanity go deep in Africa, deep, millions of years back. All of evolution can be seen right in this one spot in Olduvai Gorge. And I looked up at the ridge above the gorge, and I saw like the trees kind of blowing around. And I kind of pictured almost like a ghostly image of like all these human species walking past each other, interacting almost as if they were in a marketplace or something like that. And I never forgot it. I didn't think about it at the time that I'd make a comic about it, but there was definitely a big step in that direction. The last piece that really tied me together is I'm always reading books on evolution. I just think they're fascinating. we've overlapped with other human species many times in our history. The most recent one was with Neanderthals in Europe. But 2 million years ago, there was a moment where that matched my vision, where there was still Lucy's species was still alive and in East Africa. So were like multiple other species. Like I have the ones I've listed in the book, like Homo habilis, the tool maker, and Homo erectus, the fire starter. And that's the key. Not 2 million years ago, all the A team of our species, of our evolutionary plan was all around at the same time. And fire was introduced into the mix. And I only just realized that a few years ago when I was reading a book called Catching Fire, How Cooking Made Us Human. And I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head, but it's in that book. And there it is, fire.
Yeah.
We learned to control fire and eat cooked food. It changed our biology. It changed the shape of our bodies. Around that same time, we started to shed our hair. And we know that because they can check the DNA of lice and things like that. But it's all very fascinating. And we really began 2 million years ago. That's where we started.
And you say almost with relish in your introduction that we do not come from like a straight line. Like we are the direct result of like a mess. And do you find the idea of a mess like comforting or inspiring?
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah. We came from a train wreck. It's just, maybe that's because, I'm an American and that's our story. We're a big mess, but it's a big, smart mess. I think that's fascinating. I really do.
When we meet Tuki for the first time, he is extremely like inventive and self-sufficient, but he's also like extremely attractive, like, which is an important trait evolutionarily, but he's also like compassionately gathering this like little group of misfits. When we see Tuki specifically, are we supposed to have that light bulb moment of like, Tuki, that's us? Or are we supposed to relate to the group like more as a whole?
I think it's a little of both. Tuki is really kind of based on the lone wanderer, the Clint Eastwood character. Really, he was based on Toshio Mifune from
Yojimbo Sanjuro.
Yojimbo, exactly. I mean, that's kind of who. If I could go back in time and get him to play him in the movie, kind of thing.
He has that like. The expression does feel like Mifune at times.
Yeah, and I give him Mifune's sides, and so he is a lone wanderer. But there was a moment when the kids came in when I also wanted him to be one of the most compassionate people. I wanted him to be honestly good, not necessarily, he's not grandmotherly with these kids or anything, but his first instinct is to be good beyond survival. And I wanted to say this is the moment where we started to be a little bit more like us. And of course, I modernized it with language and things like that.
But he seems to be like treated like with this reverence and admiration everywhere he goes.
A little fear too.
But people kind of like when other species meet him, they kind of feel that momentum of the future.
Yes, well, definitely, yes, and that's like Doc, who he nicknames Doc, is this sort of like this prophet or a mystic seer who's been outcast by his people. He sees something in Tuki. And it's something that's probably scary because it's probably something to do with the fact that this is the new thing. This is rock and roll showing up, and this is the Beatles. We're in trouble. But on the other hand, he can't take his eyes off him, and he is doing things that are surprising to them, like fighting, giant ape gods and stuff like that. So when they get those night visitors in the second book, they're a little worried. They're nervous. They don't just come up and start tearing up the place. They're checking them out and scoping them out first.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the hidden world and the ape gods and your balance of, science / fantasy and science / mysticism, something that you've explored in your previous work. But I guess I was like a little surprised to see it evolve in this story. How did you come to that relationship?
Well, it is. I went to a lot of effort to make the tableau very scientifically accurate. There'll be no dinosaurs here. The dinosaurs have been gone for 60 million years at this point. And yet I still wanted to have, some magic in the world. And my basic rationale for that is that's what you get in La Morte d'Arthur, in the Arthurian legends. They're grounded in, they're supposedly the real kingdom, but, there's magic, there's maids standing around fountains in the middle of the woods. In, the Iliad and the Odyssey, there's sort of a mystical element. And even in Moby Dick, my favorite book of all, it's very realistic. And yet Moby Dick is totally magic. He is a smart monster. So to me, that's just what storytelling is, and it's my favorite kind. I'm always fascinated with the invisible. In Rassel, it was physics and parallel universes, and in Bone, of course, it was that dreams connect us, and it's all. There's something going on that we don't see everything that's going on. With
the relationship with fire in particular, and I love the idea of cooking, as a avid Top Chef viewer, Lisa and I, the idea of cooking being kind of the moment where humanity evolved because of it. But there are moments in the first book of Tuki where people encounter fire, or the other versions of man encounter fire, and they're like, this is blasphemy. Cooking flesh is blasphemy. So you give them that a point of view and that perspective, but you also allow those characters to discover the wonder of fire as well. I slept by a fire for the first time. That was really something special. What did you want to convey in these other characters, this found family encountering fire?
Well, I think we're kind of setting up the next age of the world in a way. I don't know more than that, except that I want the family to kind of go along with Tuki and see that it's not so bad. That's not going to be such an easy thing for everybody else, though. I mean, Tuki's not going to be able to just say, here, look how good a hot dog is. I mean, it's not going to fly. But for this little group, they recognize that Tuki's onto something. And of course, the two children are of the same, they're the same as Tuki. So they're from fire. They're fire folk as well.
Yeah, the youth.
Well, it seems that like every subsect of people is defined by what they fear. Like the Habeline fear fire, and the Pithecines like fear individuation. And then I feel like even the kids, they have a very like strong fear of others. But at the beginning of the story, like Tuki is not sure what he's afraid of. And when he finally finds it and he realizes, oh my goodness, my hands are shaking, he's not like, it doesn't turn him off. Like he is suddenly all of a sudden like proud. Like, where does that pride come from?
Well, I mean, he's kind of he's a loner. And I think, he's reluctantly, he wants to help these people, these people. Something about them makes him want to help them. But I think it helps define him as well. I think he is getting something out of seeing them too. So he's liking it. I think he's liking having this little found family. Also, he almost got eaten by a saber tooth. So.
So that rush of survival. To me, you mentioning the thing about cooking like brings Tuki together for me, where like, oh, it is that like, because cooking is like the center of us coming together, like the image of the family like around the table, you know. We actually don't know a lot about where Tuki comes from. Like, we know he had sisters. We knew he killed at least one giant before we met him, and we know his lore, right? But we like, are we going to learn more about Tuki's origins, or is it better that is like shrouded in mystery?
No, we'll learn some more. I mean, you kind of have to, but not too much. I mean, you can't know too much about Yojimbo. You know, it's you kind of have an idea, but at some point, isn't there a moment in Yojimbo where he makes his first big mistake during the hostage exchange?
Yeah,
and you kind of learn like, oh, something like that happened to him when he was a little boy, and that makes him make a mistake. Because he loses his cynicism for a second.
Yeah,
so,
and you gain humanity for him in that moment too. Like you see him as more than just the icon.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to learn some more about him, and like cooking, we're going to get into more of that. And because really, if you think about like a prime, like a gorilla or something, or even a chimpanzee, they have big guts, and that's because if you're eating plants, or even if you eat some meat but eat it raw, you need that takes up a lot of real estate in your intestines. You need a lot of that. So as soon as we started eating cooked food, we could digest it much easier. We could slim down, and digestion takes a lot of blood power too. So now that blood power could go other places, like to your brain. And that's exactly what they think happened. And I did allude a little bit to like the kids were talking about Z and La were talking about which one do you like better, meat or the vegetables? And I researched it, and apparently they're like, the potatoes, you put them in the fire and it releases the sugars in it, and they become soft and sweet and easy to digest, and the same with the meat. So I'll get more into that cooking stuff later.
I'm also really curious about the differentiation of the kids, because we have La, who's leaning more towards gatherer, caretaker, and then we have Renan, who is going like more in the hunter protector kind of direction. But then we have Z, who is the drawer of swirls. And I love that moment between Z and La, where La looks at the swirl and she sees the swirl going towards the center, and like Z keeps it to herself, but I get the sense that she sees her swirls as going from the center out. So I'm like wondering if, like, to me, I feel like she might be the one who is most like Tuki, who sees like this going away from the center, like this potential, like, because it'll just like a swirl that goes from the center never stops, right? It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I like that. I hadn't actually thought of that. It never stops.
Yeah.
Right. That's very cool. That's very cool. That's absolutely right. Yeah. The La is definitely likes the hunting. She likes the gathering. Pup and Renan likes the hunting. And she's the artist, and she's kind of the new direction, just like Tuki.
I want to talk a little bit about Coral.
Yay.
And the design of Coral as being something, I think you've even said it at some point in the back matter, in the same design sense as the Bone Cousins. And why is it important for that version of our evolution to have that kind of cartooning style?
I would, after Bone, I did Wrestle, which was, kind of a mystery science fiction noir thing. And I really missed drawing a cartoon character, having that cartoon character in there. The Bones were just the most fun thing to draw ever, right? And I happened to listen to your your podcast with Chris and Laura Somni this morning.
Oh, wow.
And he said something that is also true for me. When he wanted to draw in jhana, he was tired of drawing right angles. So he wanted to come up with something. And I'll tell you what, I did wrestle. And so I forget, it was like 5 or 6 years I spent on that. And I was like, I'm never drawing a car again. We're going 2 million years into the past, into the jungles. And I really I needed a cartoon character. And that just seemed like I just picked that one because they're not human yet. They're half human. So,
and you know, like on the other end of the spectrum to Tuki, you know, Tuki's like a Mifune character. Like Quarrel has like a little bit of that Mifune-ness to him as well. Like there's a history in Quarrel, like that we have a better sense of in volume 2 that we did not get in volume 1. And like, if there's a history I want to see further explored, it's Quarrel's history.
Well, that was definitely going to have to come out. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's part of the story. And, but yeah, I always like to have one kind of crazy character like that. Like that's Grandma Ben or Smiley Bone. There's got to be someone who's a little bit magical. You don't really understand. You can't really question it. You know, I just love that kind of a character. It's like Linus in Peanuts.
Yeah.
If he's going to have a snowball fight with Charlie Brown, while Charlie Brown makes his little fort, he turns around and Linus has like a castle with a drawbridge made out of snow.
Yeah.
It's a little magical, just a little bit. I love that kind of thing.
It never ceases to like blow my mind because I'm like a huge like big picture person. That's just how I see things. I see things in like theme and symbolism, and it always blows my mind how much in comic books is defined by what the artist just feels like drawing. Like talking to the Samneys, like I was like, oh, what is the meaning of this and that? And he was like, oh, I just really felt like drawing that day. I'm like, oh, okay.
That was a very fun podcast, I gotta say. Yeah, I think so. And good comics are usually, you know, driven by an artist who just really wants to do something, loves what they're drawing. I mean, I think Kirby, you know, he was working in a really horrible or oppressive system, but he was drawing what he was having fun. He was always having fun the whole time. Galactus. All right. Yeah, let's put it in. And then, you know, and at the last minute, apparently he threw in, he'll need a herald. I'll throw in the Silver Surfer. I mean, that's fun. He's exploring the universe in his own way.
Well, you know, with Tuki, it's obvious after reading 2 volumes and then all the back matter that you give in these 2 volumes, and your obsession with this story is very intense right now. Like it seems all consuming, and it's been all consuming for a while. And, you know, where it begins as a web cartoon, and then it becomes you try to put it into the single issues, but in doing that, you see that maybe it's not going to quite work that way. And I need to retool it. How do you, I mean, maybe it's not a how do you question, but what is it like to be consumed with a story like this for a good period of time, and also promising like you're going to get 6 volumes, so you got to extend that enthusiasm for a good chunk of time going forward?
Yeah, I don't. That just wasn't a problem for me. But I used to get asked that question a lot in the early days of Bone. And I was friends with Dave Sim in those early days too, who was doing Cerebus. And people would ask us, how are you going to, you know, how could you have one character for your whole life? And I'm like, my heroes are Charles Schultz, Walt Kelly, and Carl Barks. I mean, they worked on one character their whole lives. So, I mean, occasionally did some other things, but that just seemed like, isn't that how you do it to me? So that's my answer. I don't have any problem with that. I did Bone. I was consumed with the idea in Bone of being able to tell an epic story like the Lord of the Rings and conclude it. And I was absolutely committed to. I really had no idea how many years that would take. It ended up taking, I think, 13 actually. And I didn't know, but I got to the end, and then I did that. And while I was near the end, then I was getting obsessed with like Humphrey Bogart movies, The Maltese Falcon, The Big Sleep. But that was an obsession that's been going on for my whole life, just like evolution.
Mhm.
So when I turned to this one, I just said, okay, I'm going to get into this. And I was really into Kurosawa. I mean, I am just so into his movies, especially the samurai ones, but all of them. His ability to move the story and set the scene and just put you right there and make you care is just incredible.
And
Miyazaki
composition. Yeah, Miyazaki.
Composition.
Yeah.
Well, like with Miyazaki, Miyazaki, I can think of better examples of. He wants you to feel like you're out in the country, so he'll show a little tiny path bridge over a small stream waterfall, and just look at it for a minute. I mean, if I tried to do that in an animated thing, I would talk about that, like with studios like Nickelodeon or Warner Brothers. Go, let's just stop and like look at like some water for a minute. You can't spend money on that. So, but I love those things, and I can do it in a comic book, so I do.
Well, in the back matter of both books, you talk about how much of evolution is defined by like periods of abundance and periods of like famine. And I think that maybe creativity is a little bit like that, where you move into this place of abundance and that creates a certain kind of creativity. And then you have this time of famine, which creates like this other type of creativity.
I totally agree. I probably is a lot like that. Yeah, all of our evolution really has been kind of forced ahead by two factors: environment and geography. I mean, if someone wanders into another valley and you're surrounded by mountains, you're going to evolve differently than other people, and the kind of food or how successful you can live is often controlled by climate and famine and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of fun to slip the word climate change in there a few times, because evolutionary scientists talk about it all the time. That's a big deal. Another reason I did so much back matter, I wanted to make sure that people really understood the setting of this. This was really 2 million years ago, and that this is really a part of our human story. And I didn't want to just throw it out there and have it look like, Black Tarzan or something like that. I wanted this to really make it clear where I was coming from. And I thought the only way to do that was to like really carefully present the story, and the back matter was part of that.
Towards the end of volume 2, we get this kind of promise of abundance, like off on the horizon, but we know that there's probably a lot more space than even our little family can anticipate. Like, how do you see the balance of abundance and famine over the course of like 6 volumes of a story?
It's going to ebb and flow. I kind of imagine they're going to, well, I don't want to do too much of a spoiler, but yeah,
sure.
I think it's going to come, it'll come and go.
Yeah.
They'll have to keep on its trail.
So how much of Tuki do you have planned out? Do you have, the way that you would do Bone or Razzle, you would know where it was going, and then you find it on the journey to that endpoint? Yeah,
pretty much. I was really totally committed to the ending I came up with, and it's still heading that way. But I have to confess, I'm thinking about it a little bit. But I kind of think I know where it's going for sure. Yeah.
I like that kinda. I like that kinda. I also wanted to talk about just the format of the book. It started landscape online, and then, again, you went to the single issues for a little while, then returned it to landscape and how it's being published now. And it does have that like Sunday comic feel, which gives it a little bit of a different vibe than your previous work. How do you like working in this format?
I do like it. I like it quite a bit. It's a challenging because it's different. I had never drawn a comic book before Bone, the first issue of Bone. So that a lot of that was exploring what I could do with that. I'm not a flashy panel maker. I don't make crazy panels, but I did I did want to learn how pacing works. So I got to learn. I taught myself during Bone. Then Rassel, I kind of went for a different thing. I mean, it's still shaped like a book, more vertical. But I went almost all landscape panels because I was thinking, I did that in Bone whenever you would go into the dreaming. And I would do landscape panels sort of set within panels behind.
Yeah.
And I thought with Rassel, I'm going to do something new. I'm going to do all landscape panels. It's not 100% landscape panels, but it's mostly. And that was fun and interesting to do. And with Tuki, because I thought, I'm going to do a webcomic, I thought I'm going to landscape it. And I had to figure out new ways to tell this, to show the story. And one of the ways I came up with was, I don't know if this is ever going to be visible on.
No, it won't be, but
you can screen cap it.
We could, we'll screen cap it, put it into the episode.
So it's I came up with this method here, which is the giant introductory panel, and then but that was a tough thing to try to figure out, because I got to make sure you follow your eye goes to the right place.
Right.
And that was kind of a fun challenge. In fact, I started to think, I kind of don't do it as much anymore because it's actually harder to do. I also heard Chris and Laura talking about how much they like the book to lay flat.
Yeah.
This book lays flat like a king. I mean, I'm telling you what, look at that. It's Smithsonian, baby.
To me, this format is like super nostalgic, because I was not raised on comic books. I was raised on comic strips. So this format reminds me of when you would get the big Calvin and Hobbes and you would just lay it on your bed. Oh, it felt so good.
Yeah. There's you're not as precious with the form. You really have a tactile experience with it. You do crack it open. And it's got this floppy quality to it that a lot of other formats don't. I just think it's.
Is there other, have you found now that working in a landscape format, there are other functions that you discovered in the creation of this, in the storytelling, functional?
Yeah, I'm sure I have. I wonder if I can summon them up right now.
When a splash page happens, during the ape god fight in volume 1, or
I was just looking at that. Yeah.
It really slaps you because you've been reading it in a certain format, and then suddenly Jeff Smith comes with a splash page, and it feels widescreen in a way
it's expansive.
Yeah, it's expansive. Perfect word.
Well, and it's large too. I wanted to make it Bone. Every time we printed Bone, it got smaller and smaller, like a Scholastic.
Yeah.
So even our 1 volume is in the Scholastic size. But the original comic books were actually larger than that, and I didn't like that. I wanted to get this big. And I actually I showed it to Eric Reynolds, one of the co-publishers of Fantagraphics, because I was just wondering, what do you think of this? I mean, I wasn't asking him to publish it. I just wanted to say, what do you think? I mean, because I was not sure what the hell is anybody going to like this? And he did like it, and he said, print it big. He goes, he says, I want to see this big. So if Eric Reynolds wants to see it big, that's good enough for me, man.
Yeah.
When you're drawing, what size do you draw at?
It's about the same. It's a little bit bigger than I would draw a regular page, except turned on its side. So my paper is 17 by, what is it by? 15 by 17 or something like that. And it's 12, it's 16 by 12, I think, is the original art. So it's about 40% bigger than what you're seeing here, almost double.
So artist edition, I want it.
Yes.
I was reading an interview, I think it was with Comics XF, and you were talking to them about, I guess they asked you if you think about a young adult audience, an all ages audience when you're doing your stories, and you said you don't really. You think of it the way you would, like Dick Tracy was in a Sunday paper. What's another one? Peanuts, Prince Valiant. You think of it in those terms. Exactly. And you've never really written to a younger crowd, except for maybe once with your Little Mouse Gets Ready.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your relationship with the audience and how your audience has evolved. Like when Scholastic took over your Bone books and started publishing those, you gained like this massive all ages crowd that maybe you never anticipated. Maybe you did. I don't know.
No, I did not. When I was wanting to break into the comic book market, and I was going to, I'd only maybe 4 years earlier kind of rediscovered comic book stores. I mean, there were no kids in there. I mean, of course there were kids and there were women reading comics, but there almost none. And that's not the audience I was going for. I was kind of going for the audience. I mean, I was looking at, what did I see? I went there. I think I saw a newspaper article about Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and it was like a double page spread in the Sunday paper, and I'm like, talking about comic books. So I went down to find that, and I loved that Dark Knight Returns, by the way.
Yeah,
he broke some rules about how you can tell a story in comic format that made me think, oh, he did a beginning and a middle and an end.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and
for Batman. What?
Yeah. He didn't just wrap up a long serialized story. He made a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that blew my mind. But while I was there, I found like copies of Love and Rockets and Cerebus and I forget a few other books. I think, I found like Hate and
Mm-hmm.
8 Ball. And so I was thinking, okay, here's a group of kind of comics heads. You know what I mean? Like these are people, well, like you two, Brad and Lisa, are like comic heads. You love comics.
Mm-hmm.
You love the art form. You love the artists. I mean, that's who I wanted to do it to. I was hoping that whoever was buying the Tick would laugh when they saw Bone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't that I wanted to make a children's book. I wanted to make something with the quality that looked like a children's book, but wasn't really necessarily.
Mm.
And think about Dick Tracy. If you ever read like the Celebrated Cases of Dick Tracy, there was torture.
They're demented.
I mean, they're far, man. They're like, I mean, I remember, I don't understand the way I'm feeling about this.
Yeah.
It was exciting. Dick Tracy was very exciting to kids and to teenagers and adults. And Bone is not necessarily, isn't that safe? I don't put swear words in it, even though I fucking could.
You're right.
I swear like a sailor.
Yeah.
Same.
So does Lisa.
And so, but Carl Barks did never swear.
Mm-hmm.
You never saw swearing in Peanuts. So if they can do it and be that great, then that's what that was my what I was going to do.
Peanuts was also extraordinarily dark. I'm like, somebody get that kid some help. Like,
You know what? When Chris Ware was first doing Acme Novelty Library, and they were coming out in the different size formats books,
Mm-hmm.
I was just in love. And I would try to get everybody to read that. And some people got it. And they were like, what? It's so, I go, look, dude, it's Charlie Brown grown up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's the funniest depression shit ever.
Yeah.
It's great. I love it. And that's what Schultz was. Yeah, Schultz was, it was pretty dark.
Like 20 years ago, I remember, I think it was about 20 years ago, it could be a little less, but you were at SPX, and I was at the SPX where you were unveiling some of the early color panels for the Scholastic Bone. And like you had to convince the SPX crowd that this was a good idea. And I remember going like, I don't know if I'm into this idea. Yeah. But then, I went to, years passed, I went to work for Barnes & Noble, became a manager for Barnes & Noble. And the kids who came around Bone, and the way that I started to read Bone through nieces and nephews' eyes, Nibbling's eyes, it really opened up the comic for me again. And that's what I kind of wanted to know from your perspective as the creator. Emotionally, what is it like to see your work get discovered in a new way like that?
It was quite amazing. And Scholastic was really sure that it was going to work, but they'd never published a graphic novel before. So, and at the time, It was actually, they were trying to think about it, and they were in talks with Art Spiegelman and his wife, Francoise Mouly, about maybe them coming on board and like maybe running some, editing a line of graphic novels or something. And it was actually Art who contacted me to do it. So, and it was also Art's idea to do it in color. And he had to convince me, because I'm like, Art, I love Mouse. Mouse was one of the things that put me over the edge and made me realize that you can do a graphic novel and tell a real story and do art, and it's in black and white. But he really believed that the color would work, and so I tested it out, and it looked pretty good. I think it gets better, like starting with the second volume. And Steve Hammaker, he'd never done any color either, but he was working with us designing toys and doing ads and stuff. And he just took off. I mean, especially, and he was good, really good at the beginning, but when you got to like a fourth or fifth book, I'm like, man, this is good. This is good stuff. So yeah, but then there was a weird moment where I realized kids really liked it. And I was talking at schools and stuff, and they have a whole different appreciation of it than I did. And I was a little worried, to be honest. Like, I used to have, go to shows every year, and people would come get their books signed, and then, be a line of people to get the new book. And I was like, well, what's going to happen now? Because now it's kids. So an amazing thing happened. The grown-ups and the kids all came and stood in line and intermingled. Yeah. You've got, giant comic book nerds with long hair, and and then you got a mom and her little kids. I mean, and then they're all in line, and they're all talking to each other about Bone. Yeah. Like, oh, like the adults are going, oh, you like the dragon? Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I do too. Yeah. So it was a brand new life. I mean, Bone was very successful in terms of indie comics, but it was a whole new ballgame once Scholastic took over. It was just much, much bigger.
I actually taught at an elementary school. I was an elementary school music teacher, if you can't just read that energy off of me. But I was from 2012 to 2017. And all kids loved Bone, and they also loved Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Smile. And it was like the height of I felt like the height of comic books getting kids to read again. And now I still work with kids. But now some of them that go to the same school are being specifically told not to when they're bringing books for reading day, not to bring books with pictures. So I feel like there's now like a cultural, it's got all of these kids to read, but they haven't necessarily moved on to quote unquote real books, which makes me sick. And I do tell my children, those are real books. Your teachers are wrong. But
I know what you're talking about. It's I mean, it's a backlash, and a lot of cartoonists are artists, and they're smart, and they're usually more liberal, and that probably comes through to the parents, and parents are very. I mean, there's a whole backlash in this country about just diversity and equality. We don't want Black people to be equal. We don't want trans people to be equal. They're not saying that, of course, because they're chickens and cowards. But that's what's really going on. It's really it's an attack against progressive ideas and thoughts. And graphic novels are getting swept up in that. Well, we'll win.
Yeah.
We will.
I mean, to me, it's that thing about abundance and famine again, and I think at the end of the day, the war is won culturally. And I think that's where we're seeing the progress still is culturally.
The spiral is going outward. The spiral is not going in.
Right. There's definitely forces trying to go back in. And it could get ugly, but this is not the first battle I've been involved in. I mean, from the day one when Bone was a success, there were people that viewed Bone's success as somehow negating the things they liked.
Yeah.
Okay. And that, I mean, I had to put up with that. There were real serious bone haters for a long time. And then graphic novels. I was part of that first wave of artists who we would spend, all night long during conventions up in somebody's hotel room or something, talking about graphic novels. We've got to get graphic novels because they're permanent. They're not a magazine.
Yeah.
They're not collector's items. They're books. And when you sell out, so we wanted I was very, very pushy on that point. And I caught some big grief. I remember Wizard Comics, which eventually came around to kind of liking my stuff, but they were like, you should not be selling the first 6 issues of Bone for $12, because it was worth, like, the first issue was worth like $300 or something at some point in the 90s. And I called him up and I said, what the heck? Why'd you put Bone it was $300 last issue and now it's $175? What's going on? And they said, you're ruining the market. You're ruining the market. That's how. So so there was a huge backlash against graphic novels, and then of course there's always been the comics cause illiteracy.
Right.
But you know what? We defeated that.
Yeah.
And this is just the newest version of it. We're just going to keep at it. We're going to keep teaching kids to read, and there's nothing in my books that tells them how to think. It just tells them, it does tell them to question authority and make your own decisions, but that's not the same thing.
Well, to me, it reminds me of that scene in Tuki where the Habeline warriors are approaching, and he knows that they're offended by his fire, but he doesn't put out his fire. He says, come sit with me.
He invites them.
Have some food with me. Come, so it's like, yeah, walk softly, carry big pointy stick. Like,
or a big leg of venison or whatever.
Yeah, there you go. I love that portrayal of humanity being ultimately about coming together and ultimately about optimism.
Yes.
I think it's really good.
And the scary side is present in this story as well.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a lot of stuff that we've been talking about. Well, I don't remember. I had a second thought there, but it went away.
Well, Jeff, is there anything about Tuki that we have not covered that you would want covered before we finish this conversation?
No, this was very fun for me to talk to you guys. You're the very first people outside of my family, including my cartoon books coworkers, that have read it.
Oh my God.
So you're the first reaction, and that bodes well, I think.
We love it.
We love it.
100% of your readers are bowled over.
Yeah. It's 100%.
100%.
Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes approved 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like just illustration wise, I think this comic, I tweeted this out today. Like, I think volume 2 has some of the best action you have done from a pacing point of view. Like, the climax of this story is so exciting.
Oh, thank God.
I mean,
I worried about it.
Well, you don't need to. I think it's really phenomenal. And it is one of those books that I want to like champion.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa and I were talking about it earlier. It's a book that we're going to put into our nibblings hands and our friends' hands and point people to, because we find it to be really special. Which is, again, like astonishing to me, because Bone for Lisa and I is a heart comic. Bone made us the people we are today.
Wow.
And so to see you kicking so much ass on Tuki is like so inspiring. I
got to tell you, it feels good when I'm working on it.
Mm.
I'm like, I'm feeling the zen. This is fun. I'm enjoying this. The challenges are hard, but I'm liking it. So that's a good sign. I feel good about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm already anticipating volume 3.
Yes.
And
I'm sure that'll be out before 2027. I'm sure.
Awesome.
Well, we're planning on still being around. So.
And I did not want to let you go. You have mentioned that there will be a Bone Tall Tales 2, possibly.
Yes. I'm working on that right now. We've got so this is you can screen cap that.
Oh yeah.
We
got it.
Bone Tall Tales 1. Which I wrote with my friend Tom Snagowski, who was one of the funniest guys I know. But he was, at the time I was hanging around with him, he was writing Vampirilla and Buffy, which have minor elements of humor, but nothing what I thought he was capable of to really show him off. So we did this, we came up with, let's make up some tall tales and just go crazy. So it was a fun book to do, and I had to reread it to do a book too. Scholastic actually wanted another book.
Awesome.
And I had done Coda for the 25th anniversary of Bone, which was like one little extra
morsel.
Yeah, it was like a little morsel. I think it was like 40 pages. It was a big story, or 36, I can't remember. And I wanted to color that and get it in the Scholastic canon into these graphics books. So we said, let's do Tall Tales 2 and have that be a story that somebody tells in the book. And we got 3 artists, 4 counting. We got Stan Sakai, who did a story with the Stupid Rat Creatures, written by Tom. We got Matt Smith, who does a lot of stuff with Mike Mignola. He did a Rat Creature story. And what else? Who else did we get? I have a list. I can't remember. Scotty Brown.
Oh, Scotty.
Brown.
Okay.
And Katie. I'm blanking on her name. I'm sorry, Katie. I'm very sorry. I have to look it up. I'll email it to you.
Okay, yeah, email it to us. Yeah, awesome. Hey everyone, Brad from the future. Jeff did email us and told us it's Katie Cook, the incredible writer behind IDW's My Little Pony comics, as well as Gronk. And she illustrated a series of Star Wars children's books that I really enjoyed: Creatures Big and Small, Search Your Feelings, and my favorite, ABC3PO. So go check out Katie's work and get ready for some Tall Tales too. Now back to Past Brad and Lisa with Jeff Smith. Well, Jeff, this has been an absolute pleasure.
A dream come true. Oh, Jinx.
Jinx, dream come true. For our listeners, I'm going to have links in the show notes, but for those people who don't read the links in the show notes, where can they find you online to continue this conversation? Where can they get Tuki?
They can get Tuki anywhere. The Tuki the first book, Tuki Fight for Fire, came out in December. It's going back for the 3rd printing. We just sent it to the printers. Printing. That could be, you can get that anywhere. You can get it online. You can get it in comic book stores. It's in it's all over. And the same with 2, which will ship in July. That will ship in July, and it'll be available everywhere. And you can get a hold of me. I'm at boneville.com, and also I'm on Twitter at Jeff Smith's Bone. Very funny.
Well, my Twitter handle is at mouthdork because of In the Mouth of Dorkness. And when I came up with it, I did not realize what I was saying.
Oh, sure you did.
Maybe I did. Maybe I did a little bit. There you go. Jeff, again, thank you for joining us. And we hope to get you back on to talk more Tuki as more Tuki becomes available.
And after listening to Chris and Laura this morning, we need to get my comic book couple together. I mean, She's been my partner from day one. We do everything together. So
yes,
next time we do this, we'll get the couple.
Yes, please do. Let's take it to the next level. Date night.
Date night.
Date night podcasting.
That sounds great.
All right, Jeff. You have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, take care. How amazing was that conversation? So special. I love the moment where he brings up our conversation with Chris and Laura Somni about Jonna and the Impossible Monsters, and how Chris had mentioned like what was so important to him was laying out those single issues flat, and how Jeff Smith has to get in there like, hey, with these Tuki trades, these very big, very large, floppy Tuki trades, you can crack that spine and lay him flat on a bed.
Format matters.
Yes, format matters.
And Tuki evolved through several formats until it got to the Homo erectus, most dominant species, the book.
Yeah. I love how this book sits in my lap or lies on my bed when I get on my belly to read it. It does feel very, very good. It's a comforting read. And, because it is so large, like you really get to like drink in Jeff Smith's illustrations, which Jeff Smith, I told him to his Zoom face, that the action in Tuki, especially in volume 2, is some of the best action, if not the best action he's ever done sequentially.
I also really appreciate getting to get into some of the dismissiveness in the educational system of graphic novels.
Yeah, that was fun.
And him saying, well, a lot of graphic novels, they're created by artists who have a more liberal mindset.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of our conversation from our last Saga episode about how putting ideas in someone's head is a proactive, course-changing thing to do.
A violent action, even.
And we've seen across our nation this kind of anti-progressive crackdown of conservatism. So schools saying, I'm sorry, but your comic books are not books. It's not them being pro-literacy, but being more anti-ideas. Because as an educator, I saw that the influx of graphic novels into our school got kids excited about reading.
Yeah.
And by saying, I'm sorry, that thing that you're attracted to, that you want to read, that inspires and encourages you, that's not a book.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
And in the last several months, you've encountered that in your private lessons, that very, phrase, that's not a book. It's appeared a lot, right?
Yeah.
And it's infuriating. But what I appreciated so much from Jeff Smith's point of view is this level of optimism, right? He's been in these fights before. This is actually nothing new. And we always win. Ideas always win. The delivery system may change, single issues, digital downloads, whatever, format. But comics are not going anywhere, and neither are their creators, and neither are their creators' ideas.
But it would be nice to just hit the fast forward button.
Of course.
And
yeah.
have freedom and self-expression exist today.
Yeah, yes.
For everyone.
Of course. And just because I have hope for the future doesn't mean I could just sit back and chillax. We have to be proactive in our activism. We have to get out there in the world and be the change we want to see.
The ones with the best ideas will thrive and survive, just like Tuki did.
Yeah, just like Tuki did. And that's going to do it for our Jeff Smith episode. I hope you all enjoyed it half as much as we enjoyed it. Please share it with all of your friends. That would be swell. And go out to your library. See if they've got a book sale going on. If they don't, check out some comic books. Hoopla has so many comic books free for your fingers and your eyes right now. And if you're in the Virginia area, or if you're not in the Virginia area and you have access to the internet, please support one of our favorite comic book shops, 4-Color Fantasies. I'll have links in the show notes to their Facebook page and their Twitter account. They are currently doing a sketch cover auction benefiting the Winchester Literacy Volunteers, and they have original art going for killer deals right now from people like James Herron, Scott Morse, David Lapham, Jim Rugg, incredible talent. And these prices are not crazy. In the past, we have acquired original pieces by Jeff Lemire and Steve Lieber. They've had a Daniel Warren Johnson piece. Now, that one went for quite a pretty penny. But you'd be surprised what you can get for under $100 here.
It's kind of financially irresponsible for us to promote it because we are quickly being priced out of winning these amazing covers.
Yeah, we have bids out for 2 Scott Morse covers right now, and
you could probably easily beat them.
You could easily get them for a good deal.
Steal it right out from under us.
And I wish you would, because it's such a great charity, and I love what 4-Color Fantasies are doing, that they do every year.
So awesome.
Yeah, support them, get some rad art in the process.
So what's coming up next week for Comic Book Couples Counseling?
So we spoiled it a little bit already in the intro, but Stan Sakai is coming on Comic Book Couples Counseling. This Thursday, the 28th, is the premiere of Samurai Rabbit, the Usagi Chronicles on Netflix. We've seen the first few episodes. We had a great time with them. Now, it's not a direct adaptation, and we get into it with Stan Sakai, why that is the case.
And it's kind of better that way, I think.
I mean, I'm a little relieved. Like, I was relieved just how good the cartoon was. And so I like what they're doing with Samurai Rabbit. And we get into it with Stan Sakai. We also have the art director from the show, Kang Lee, talking with us and how he went about updating or changing the designs of the classic Usagi Yojimbo characters and backgrounds. It's a lot of fun. And very excited to get that out into the world. If you are joining us for the first time, please go back and listen to our Saga episodes. We just completed 8 podcasts devoted to Marco and Alana's relationship. We poured our heart and soul into those conversations. We love those conversations. And so go check those out. Our next couple session will involve Angela and Sarah from the Marvel Comics series Angela, Asgard's Assassin. And that's a series that people have been demanding on this podcast pretty much since the beginning.
Okay, Brad, another great episode in the can. I gotta go. I have some very important swirls to draw from the inside out. So where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on all social medias at MouthDork. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art and show poster, send them over to Karen Charm at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I am always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Google, and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on Instagram and Twitter at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show while you're there? We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
Yeah, so until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open. Yeah.
Doopy doopy bum 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 ba.
3 and a 2 and a 1. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us at Comic Book. I'm doing this over again.
We're just excited.
A little excited.
I feel like I deserve a high five for all of the times I said Homo erectus and didn't giggle.
High five.